Welcome back to The Why. I'm Cristina Muchler. There are so many strategies out there right now to try to help curb our nation's opioid crisis, like changing prescribing practices, tightening up laws. But there's one method out there that you haven't heard much about, and that's creating a new pain-killing drug without the addiction factor by studying mutant DNA. Sounds kind of scary, but it is real. A rare genetic condition called chronic insensitivity to pain, or CIP, is helping scientists do that. CIP itself is the result of a defect in your DNA, and people who have that condition don't feel any pain at all. Using that genetic DNA mutation as a model, researchers are looking at how they can imitate that lack of pain and create a new drug without addictive properties that would take the place of opioids. The risk of addiction wouldn't be there because, in theory, the new drug wouldn't involve a neurological process like opioids do. This alternative therapy for pain could potentially help our opioid crisis big time. This mutant DNA research was described in an NBC article I read as having the potential to give us a new family of drugs capable of switching off pain before it's even perceived by the central nervous system. I talked to Mary Fry-Vogel from the National Society of Genetic Counselors to find out more about how genetic testing could have a huge impact on the opioid epidemic.
On a cellular level, essentially what that SCN9A gene does is it's responsible for opening and closing a membrane in the cell that allows basically particles to flow through. And so when those particles flow through, they are registering pain in the brain, okay? So if that gene isn't working correctly, then what happens is that those little channels in the cell can't open and close. And so there essentially is no pain registered because those channels aren't working correctly. And so it really is responsible for a lack of sensitivity to pain on a cellular level. So, right now, the way that we're treating pain is with these opioids, and what they do is they work on the level of the brain to basically hinder pain. And so what we have concerns about there are things like addiction, right? Because it's functioning on the neurological level. So what the interesting thing about this disease is that since we know that this gene encodes for the proteins that are responsible for these channels in the cell, it gives researchers a clue that, hey, if we can mimic this genetic disorder by inhibiting these little channels in the cell, then we can essentially prevent pain, right? And so people who have chronic pain, we can almost, sort of give them a little bit of this disorder, and we can give them medication that works instead on a cellular level to target those specific little channels versus a neurological level. And so what we're hoping with that is that by targeting that cellular level, we're going to be more effective in how we're treating pain, and we're also going to have a less dangerous way to treat pain because the risk of addiction isn't there.
That's really awesome. I'm wondering if you're hopeful if that's something that could happen in the near future, or are we just at the very beginnings of this research, or?
Yeah, so there's definitely still more research to be done. We always have to, really thoroughly test these medications. And from what I understand, from what I read, they're, still in the process of doing that, moving through approval with the FDA. But I think they are hopeful that this will be something that will be applicable to patients with chronic pain in the fairly near future, but definitely not ready to be used quite yet.
And then I think probably the end hope is to use it to maybe help change the way that we prescribe medications, specifically opioids, and maybe hopefully help change the scope of the crisis that we're in right now.
Yes, absolutely. And, I think this is a really great thing to think about when we start to work on developing drugs. And there's actually a drug that's used to lower cholesterol that was developed in this very same manner. Basically, they found a gene mutation in people who inherit a risk to have very high cholesterol. And once they found what that gene mutation was, they were able to look at how that gene acts in the body and find something that inhibited that gene. And then they try it on people who don't have the genetic condition, but just have high cholesterol, and they realize that it worked for them. And so this is a really, really interesting way to think about designing drugs in the future.
Some pretty cool research being done there. Let's check out some of the other stories I've been following today. The vitamin C that you get from your morning glass of orange juice or other food could lower your risk of developing leukemia. Researchers say the vitamin suppressed cells that cause the cancer, and they're now working with the CDC to find out if this could also apply to other forms of cancer. More Americans are quitting smoking, which is obviously a good thing, but even more would stop when the price of a pack of cigarettes went up. A study found that an increase of just $1 on a pack of cigarettes caused 20% more smokers to stop the habit. This is The Why.